so far. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Jodo Cast, your Star Wars gaming podcast. This is episode 61, because I checked ahead of time this time. My name is Evan Lewis. I am joined by Leo Andry.
Yep.
Hey, there he is. And Joe Latovsky.
Guten Tag.
There you go.
You put me on the spot. I couldn't think of a language greeting.
That's all right.
I don't know if I'd used that one already or not.
You might have, but who cares? German is always popular. And yet again, because we just can't get rid of him, is Christian Sorrell.
Oh my gosh, I'm here 3 times on this.
Oh my
thing.
gosh,
It's
we're just
crazy.
gonna have to start paying you.
Wait,
you guys get paid? Star Wars gaming podcast money.
Yeah. Strike that from the record. Anyways, so let's see here. What are we doing? Patrons. We don't have any new ones since the last time we released an episode, which, depending on the speed of my editing, this is a bad weekend too. We'll see how quickly these episodes get out, but we still want to give big thank yous to our patrons because they are the absolute best human beings in the world. They all deserve the Nobel Peace Prize.
remember Gandhi? That guy sucked compared to our patrons.
Yep, he's a chump. Gandhi 2 now. I did love Gandhi 2. That was pretty great.
Gandhi 2 is great.
He's no more Mr. Passive Resistance.
He's out to kick some butt. So yeah, patrons are
I
kind of
preferred
like that.
Conan the Librarian.
I'm just gonna be
Don't
laughing
you
now.
know the Dewey Decimal System?
All right. I think that movie gets almost as many shout-outs as the actual Star Wars movies do.
I feel sad for our listeners that have no idea what we were just talking about.
I do too.
Well, they need to go watch that movie right now.
It's a classic.
It's good for you. It'll teach you all about turtles. So, yes, thank you, patrons. You rock. Moving on. What we've been playing. Well, I don't think anything in between the time that we recorded our last episode and this one, because it's been all of 15 minutes. So unless anyone got any games of Force Arena in between recordings, or Galaxy of Heroes for that
no.
matter.
I ran a raid in Galaxy of Heroes while I was waiting for my laptop to reboot.
Did you really?
Yeah. So there we go. That's what I've been playing.
Hey. Well, the rest of
It
us
was,
are
it
losers.
was a heroic Rancor pit raid. Very exciting.
It sounds like it. Well, we're just going to jump straight into this then, since we don't have much else to talk about, because we've talked about everything else that we would have already. Never mind. Time dilation effect. Let's talk about the newest miniatures game for Star Wars from Fantasy Flight Games, and I am already shaking my head. It's called Star Wars Legion. So, we didn't really talk about the announcement a lot on the most previous episode, so Christian, if you can just give us a quick rundown of the announcement, how it played out, if there was anything that they really wanted us to walk away with to make us excited, and then we'll get to the nitty-gritty of what's been released so far as information.
Yeah, at the in-flight report, they showed a very dramatic trailer. It's like the first time I can think of ever seeing, like, they may have done this before with other games, so it's the first time I can think of seeing like an announcement trailer for a miniatures game. It was very dramatically shot, but like of these little miniatures. It was pretty cool.
I would have preferred if you could see the people's hands, like
fighting. It was like little kids with an action figure. Like, they went,
right.
pew, 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 pew. But set with this set with the John Williams score behind it. Yeah, so they showed the trailer, and then kind of immediately like got into talking about it, it seemed like the main things that they wanted to set straight pretty early was that it doesn't use like rank and file type movement. It uses unit cohesion, which is similar to me as somebody who played 40K, but it's this kind of freeform unit based movement. And then that it also basically that it's an entirely new system, not related to Rune Wars, or I think Rune Wars is the name.
Yeah,
of their
Rune
other
Wars
miniature
Miniatures
systems.
is pretty new. I think that game's only been out for a couple months.
Yeah, because he mentioned on stage that like, oh, and there are a lot of people in the rumors lead up to this. There were a lot of people who thought this would be based on Rune Wars, and it's an entirely different system. So that was their other big thing too, is kind of setting the expectation that it is going to be, some aspects of it should be similar to people who've played their other Star Wars games, but it's also like a system that they've made dedicated to the license. Basically, it's not like just a copy of their other stuff.
Looking at it makes sense because the lead designer is Alex Davey, who was pretty big in X-Wing. He's still on X-Wing, and I think was the lead on Armada. And it looks like a lot of influences from X-Wing and Armada in this game, as far as kind of the movement and the measurement and kind of the free form, movement around the board. I don't know. I thought I could tell that it was an Alex Davey game, I guess, which is, well, I shouldn't say that. He didn't design X-Wing from the beginning, but it definitely looks like it has a lot of influences from those two games.
Yeah, I think that it definitely does. It feels like once they dug into it a little bit more, because as I mentioned earlier, right, I'm kind of this, which I don't even know if this is necessarily how Warhammer 40,000 does it anymore, but 40K used to be like you bought miniatures and you bought like a rule book or like a book for your faction, and then everything basically was in the book, like the damage numbers, the stats, the range. So it was kind of, you just had a big book you brought with you and your miniatures, and that's it. And this is definitely following the kind of like X-Wing style of, it comes with, specific like range rulers, and you have cards for like your abilities and for your different squads. And so it's definitely that very Fantasy Flight kind of X-Wing style of like, you have a card that you can quickly access of all of the different things going on in the battlefield. Other than that, the main thing they announced was essentially that everything that they showed there, which was like Luke, Vader, and then like basically Rebel Squad, Stormtrooper Squad, and then a vehicle on each side.
Yep, the Rebels had an ATRT, and the Empire had 2 speeder bikes.
Yes, yeah, the speeder bikes, that's what it was.
I thought it was really cool that the Rebels got the ATRT, and they mentioned that, they had, obviously they couldn't be in the game, but I guess they had to just mention that they, got approval from the Lucasfilm story group to put that in the game. I think Alex Davies said the story group, but in any case, I think it's really cool that the Rebels get an ATRT, which is one of the little walkers from the Clone Wars that they, kind of like almost like a motorcycle. You're just kind of in the open.
Yeah, it wasn't like what I was expecting, I guess, from them, which was cool. But all of that they showed at Gen Con essentially is what comes in the core set. And
except all that cool terrain they had.
Yes, except, the like wonderful paint jobs and the things being assembled and the wonderful terrain and all that stuff. But those miniatures are what comes in the core set. So that was kind of all the main takeaways from the in-flight report and the kind of announcement.
One of I think the bigger mechanics in the game that I found the most interesting was how you command your units, because we have different ways of doing it in different games. In Armada and Imperial Assault, it's just when it's my turn, I get to pick one of my guys to go. That's all there is to it. In X-Wing, it's determined by the pilot skill. And in Legion, now has, I think, maybe the most interesting way of all. Like, at the start of a round, both players have to put a command card face down, and then you flip them up, and then whichever one has the higher priority goes first. But so then you kind of get to go first that round, but it also says how many of your units you can basically give a command to. Let's say I've got 5 units on the board, like one squad of Rebel Troopers, one squad of Rebel Troopers, Luke, and my ATRT and whatever else. If I pick the one with the highest priority, it only lets me give a command to one of my units, which means when it comes to my turn, I can pick that one guy to go, and all the other ones, all those tokens are going to go in a bag, and I have to pick them randomly. So I get absolute control over one of my units gets to go when I want him to go, and everybody else is going to be random. If I didn't need to be first that round, I could have played the command card that lets me activate maybe 4 of my units. But, you know, my opponent's going to go first, but now for this round, I'm going to have a much greater control over which one of my people gets to activate when. So it's kind of like a struggle on how much control over my activations do I want versus how badly do I need to go first versus what other effect on this card do I want, because the command cards all have kind of special effects, like I don't even know an example, but they have little special effects, and I think individual commanders can bring special command cards into those decks too.
I think the basic command cards, from what I saw, didn't have any special effects. It was just the commander command cards that had extra effects. The other ones were just basic. This is how many units you get to activate, and that was about it.
Yeah, I really liked that you basically have to activate your units at random, and only some of them you have control over depending on like kind of what you risked in the command phase to go first or not.
And they also have to be in range of one of your commanders to be one of the ones that you're
giving the little command token to.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so positioning and your proximity to your commander unit will be a vital part of your strategies. But I thought that was kind of the most interesting aspect of the gameplay to me. The attack and defense seemed very similar to other games like X-Wing and Imperial Assault, where you could roll a surge result and that has kind of turns into a different ability. It's not as varied as Imperial Assault, where, you know, one person might have 4 different options to do with a surge result. In this game, it's each unit has like 1 offensive and 1 defensive surge, but everything else did feel kind of standard for, if you've played X-Wing Armada, this game I feel like is going to come pretty easily to you.
Yeah, I think that those dynamics you're talking about are probably the thing that set it apart the most from what I've seen of the game. I kind of like that vibe though of the, you know, do you want to be like the super strategic level, like do you want to plan everything? So, well, then it's going to take more time, right, for you to go if you want to have more control over your entire force. I think that's an interesting mechanic that sets it apart. But and I like the whole kind of commander focus just because it's coming from Star Wars, right? A license that is very like individual leader focused. Yeah. So it's also cool to have it kind of built around that of, you know, like Vader is leading his troops on battle, and that actually have some like mechanical effect rather than it just being like, oh, I spent 50 of my army points on a Vader and he acts almost the same as everybody else. So that's
and I think you are obligated to have 1 commander in your army, but you can have up to 2. And I think they confirmed that Leia was going to be a future one in like the first wave, but we might get to that later. But that was kind of the mechanic that I thought was kind of neat. And there are different types of units. I don't remember what they all were, because obviously there's commanders. I think the trooper type units were just called core.
Yeah.
There's heavy, which I think in the core is just the
vehicles,
ATRT or something. Was there special?
Special, yep.
Was that all there was? Just 4 different types, or am I missing one? Okay. And there's also limits on list building there as well. I think it was in a video. They must have zoomed in on Alex Davies' rule book or something, because you can have up to 2 commanders. You can't have more than 3 heavy units. You can't have more than 3 special units. You are obligated to have a minimum amount of core units.
I think it's between 3 and 6 for core,
which I thought was really cool too, because those kind of, I don't know if you want to call them strict, but those limitations on army building means you're not going to see people spamming any one kind of unit.
Yeah, they do something similar in 40K, or at least they did as well, which is that same kind of, you know, you'd have like like elites, heavy, like these different types of things. I think it helps a lot too from like a balance standpoint in terms of their development of the game. So the idea of this being something they're going to continue to like in long term, it helps them kind of rein it in a little bit. Whereas if there was no restriction, right, you could just roll up with like, oh, I just have 7 RTs and that's it.
Right, like in X-Wing,
like, oh, that'd be weird.
When you make a ship in X-Wing, you have to see, okay, what happens if somebody fields the maximum amount of these? In Legion, that's not like as big of an issue because you can't fill up your whole team with those. Although I don't know if you would want to, because now I just actually remembered it. The other thing I thought was really neat is how you set up the battle to begin with. Because in X-Wing, there's no objectives, no nothing. It's just a dogfight. In Imperial Assault, you've got your tiles and your map, and each has 2 different scenarios. In Armada, there's like a scenario card that affects how you set up and how you score points. In Legion, it seems like the best implementation of all of those, as far as I can tell, because you've got 3 decks of cards that have 3 different. I think one is where you can deploy, one is like arena effects, and one is how you score points, something like that. And you flip up 3 from each deck, and players take turns eliminating 1 card from the 9 you flipped up until there's only 3 left. And that's how your game is going to be. It's going to affect where you can deploy, all that stuff. And I think that's really cool because when you have, 3 different cards and they're always a different combination of 3, it's going to make the kind of the scenario different every time you play, which sounds a lot more interesting, which means you're not going to be able to just train for this one scenario, that you think you're going to encounter or something like that.
Yeah, I'm interested to know how that will hold up over time, because I think that's really cool. From like my friend and I get together, we want to play, 4 or 5 matches, depending on how long those go or the size of our armies and stuff. And it's kind of like a cool, like random scenario generator idea, but I'd be interested to see how that works in like competitive environments. Although I know Fantasy Flight has a pretty strong hold on their competitive sides, like they're pretty regulated by them. So I could see them making some specific rules for that. But like in a tournament setting, it seems more like people would want to know, I'm building this army for this situation, and let's see who can do that.
Well,
best.
I think that's kind of interesting.
Rather than a whole randomization, unless that's what they want to double
I think that might be kind of what they want, is because now you can't build an army that has one purpose. You've got to build something that can try and do a little bit of everything, which makes it sound like, things are going to be a little bit more, maybe the meta won't be, defined by one particular unit or something. I don't know. I'm curious to see how that goes.
It could be cool. I mean, it could lead to very flexible army arrangements. Part of me is just, like a little skeptical on like whether people will like that, or how interested to see how the meta develops around that, because that's very unlike any miniatures games I have any experience with.
And we know how big the play space is going to be by now, right? It's 6x3.
Yep. Same size as Armada. Although, much like Armada and X-Wing, if you really wanted to, you could play it on whatever size board you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but for official play, it's going to be 6x.
And some of the things that people have been asking is...
if you go onto the forums, there's a lot of naysayers right now. Like, so much so that, apparently someone felt the need to start a thread. Let's say something positive about Legion.
Oh, geez, really?
Yeah. One that I don't think anyone should be surprised about is you're going to have to buy a separate dice pack. That's even how it was, it seemed, at GenCon in the demo videos. The people running the games like, oh, hold on, let me go grab some dice from this other table, or just remember what you had and re-roll them. Because, they were working off course box stuff. And you just don't even have enough dice to, you get like 3 white attack dice, and this person needs to roll 6 white attack dice. Okay. So you got to buy more dice, but that's not new if you've played Fantasy Flight games before. I think Imperial Assault is the only one where you can maybe get away with not buying more dice.
And even then, like we've talked about, it's a good idea to still do it.
Yeah. I think currently my biggest concern for Legion is if you can buy into one faction only. So in the Rune Wars miniatures game, if you picked one faction, I think there's 4 now, you could buy only products for that faction and be set for the game. Because I think they even have a separate product that can give you like the tools and the templates from the core set if you don't want to even buy the core. However, in X-Wing and Armada, and to a lesser extent Imperial Assault, as we know, if you only wanted to buy one faction, you'd be missing out on tons of really competitive upgrade cards. Because they just put some upgrade cards in, ship B, and you don't want to buy ship B, but you really want that upgrade card. And I'm worried it's going to be like that, and I think it probably will be.
Yeah, I think it will be too.
Which is kind of annoying because I was, I'm interested in getting this and playing it, but I'd like to stick with just one faction this time around. I've been with X-Wing and Imperial Assault. I'll play whatever. I get it all. Although I've been slowing down on X-Wing. But with Legion, it seems like it's going to be so much more expensive and time-consuming, and I'd rather just stick to one. And I don't want to have to buy things I don't want to play with or paint to get those cards.
Like, what's the joke with X-Wing? Buy 2 auto thrusters and get a Star Viper model for free with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am also afraid of that. When they first showed kind of the, that it wasn't going to be that, what I think of as the standard in my mind, that like, here's your rule book that has all your like different miniatures specifics, and it was going to be very like Fantasy Flight-arized, if that's a word. With like little like cards for everything and custom dice and all that. That's what it made me lean towards, is like, is this going to be even more of a cash sink than a standard miniatures game, which is already a huge cash sink? You know what I mean? Like, so I'm thinking, imagine if I had to buy everything from 2 different factions or 3 factions in like 40K or something, but pricing, I mean, I guess we don't necessarily know, or I don't know yet what the pricing is.
Right. I'm assuming it might be more in line with Armada, if expensive than Armada. But from what I've always hear people say is that the Fantasy Flight miniatures games are still cheaper than, those more heavier ones like 40K and stuff. I guess I don't know because I don't play those other ones, but I mean,
I think on a per miniatures basis, they definitely are. But I think it would, it'd be interesting to see how the numbers balance out with things like you were talking about, like I really need to kind of buy everything here, which doesn't happen in my experience at those other games. But yeah, just from my experience with their games, they tend to side towards they put out a wave, they put out a cycle, and it's like they really want you, if you're actively playing the game, to buy that whole cycle.
Yeah, because I just really don't want to,
which is a kind of a deal breaker,
have to buy the Empire. And if it comes to it, then I probably just won't be that competitive. I mean, if I can, resist the temptation, which might just be a necessity because I'm still trying to keep up with all the other games except Armada. But if buying one faction means my stuff is just not as competitive as it could be, I guess that's fine with me because I'm not that competitive these days when it comes to these games.
Just to kind of jump back a little bit, I just want to mention we did forget to add that supports were a different class of unit.
Oh,
I knew there was a 5th one, but I couldn't remember what it was when we were talking about that. So there we go, supports, and those I believe also can have up to 3 different support units. So
besides that concern, another concern that I have and a lot of people seem to be having is this game going to hurt the other Star Wars games that are out there? Because besides X-Wing,
LCG.
I can see all those LCG players abandoning ship. I think I see this concern most in the Imperial Assault community, particularly the skirmish community. People are wondering if skirmish players who play Imperial Assault competitively are going to just start dumping Imperial Assault to go play Legion. But even besides that single game, I think there's no way this doesn't chop up these different games communities even more. Because most people only pick one game, and then when a new one comes out, they sell their old one and jump in this new one. So, like Imperial Assault, Armada, they don't have very big communities to start with. Like, we did not have a lot of people at our store championships, and now if half of those people go to play Legion, then this is even smaller. I can see this just hurting the other games, except maybe X-Wing probably won't care as much if they lose 10 players.
Yeah, there were a lot of very vocal Imperial Assault players at like the in-flight report and stuff, and during the Q&A they did after, that was definitely like, people didn't come out and just say that, but you could get that was the vibe.
Yeah, a lot of people
felt like it was like, oh, you basically just have replaced our game.
I mean, that's sort of how I initially felt as well, but now I'm really excited about this game and I want to play it, but I'm still really worried about Skirmish because that's my favorite thing in Imperial Assault, and if that keeps fading away, that kind of sucks.
It feels like it feels like a big point of like, confusion or like rubbing, like even just the scale of the miniatures.
Right.
That question came up a lot, and the speaker, I can't remember, his last name was Navarro, but I can't remember his first name, Andrew Navarro, I think. He didn't have an exact number. He was like, they're about 34 millimeter. And then from looking on the show floor, they're like just a little bigger than Imperial.
Well,
and like in a weird way that you'd be like, why wouldn't you just make them the same size if you already had another, miniatures game? So yeah, I think it's just going to kind of throw some people for a loop, even not current players.
Did like, because Sarastro, the YouTube painter, he had actually gotten to paint the Luke miniature for them like early, and he put up his painting tutorial video that like as soon as they announced it, which is kind of funny. It's like, how do I need a tutorial to paint a product I'm not going to have for months? But I really like the detail and like kind of the art design on these new miniatures, because he had a picture of it next to one of the Luke figures from Imperial Assault, and it's kind of a night and day difference just even on the detail. But it is kind of weird. A lot of people were hoping that you could maybe cross over the miniatures between games somehow, but that's definitely not going to be the case.
Yeah, somebody actually asked that in the Q&A, and he was like, well, you can basically do whatever you want at home.
All right.
But there isn't going to be any official, basically said to, like, that's not a plan we have for there to be any related at all. So I think it was just kind of strange is how it feels right now.
Yeah, I like I said, I'm really excited about this game, but I also kind of wish it didn't exist because it's going to put strain on Imperial Assault, but I'm still excited about it, and I'll play it. And one thing, when you start to think about it more, I still think Skirmish and Legion are going to appeal to different people. Maybe people who play Imperial Assault Skirmish just wanted a ground-based miniatures combat game in Star Wars, and that was their only criteria, and they would jump to Legion. But I mean, if you look at it, Legion needs a 6x3 space. Imperial Assault needs maybe 2x2 at max. The maps aren't that big; they don't take up a lot of space. As far as like Star Wars flavor, like we said, you can have a max of 2 commanders. So you can have like Luke and Leia, or Han and Leia, or Han and Luke, or whatever on your team, and then a bunch of generic people. Whereas in Imperial Assault, I can have Han, Luke, Leia, Obi-Wan. I can have a team full of only unique characters, which is something I don't think you'll ever be able to do in Legion. So they do kind of have kind of different appeals, I guess.
I think Imperial Assault is the easier to get into and probably appeals to more people version, but there still is that, especially when it's like the same company making it, it's their new thing. I at least know that in like a lot of games, whether it's like video games, board games, anything like that, I suffer from this whole like, oh, I'm not playing like the big boy version. Like right. I don't like being like, oh, I like this game, but this is the real game. So that's kind of what I'm, interested to see if people feel that way. Like I would be like, oh, Imperial Assault's like really cool, but man, like Legion has like a lot of the same stuff that I like, but it's more time and money and everything. But yeah, I feel like it feels like they're kind of pushing. I think Fantasy Flight is seeing if there's a boundary to how much they can push the market. Like, I mean, but really, because it's like if you look at like Yeah, like you're saying, like there are definitely key game, like mechanical differences between the two, but even like X-Wing, Armada, it's like they have what, 4 miniatures games at this point, all set in Star Wars. Like, yeah, I'm just interested to see how it.
Well, I mean, at least X-Wing and Armada are very drastically different scales, where these are, like you said, they could have made them the same miniatures as Imperial Assault, and it would have worked the same. Because there was, rumors like the day before they announced it, and I assume most everyone assumed they were going to make like the Armada to X-Wing, for Imperial Assault, where you'd have large vehicles on the ground, like AT-ATs. I assumed they wanted to put an AT-AT in a game finally, but
yeah,
I'm kind of happy they didn't. I don't think that would have worked as well, because the AT-AT is like the only thing that big that they would use. But
it could still happen. I mean, if you look at,
on a 6x3 board.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at some similar games, say like Warhammer, which is played on a 6x4, I think is kind of standard for Warhammer. There's some really big models out there for Warhammer, and there's not a lot that are that big, but there are some.
They have some huge ones like Titans and stuff that get crazy.
Then I'll be sad if I'm buying exclusively Rebels when they come out with the AT-AT. Because I think we talked about this before on our Discord. If you were on our Discord, you'd know all about our deepest thoughts, that we all kind of feel like playing Rebels just because they're more fun to paint. I think that was another thing a lot of Imperial Assault players were mad about. I got to paint more Stormtroopers.
Yeah, they're not exactly the most exciting style to have to paint.
Also, unless you like really get into like adding battle damage and stuff like that to the troopers, otherwise they're just boring.
And the Rebel, because each unit of troops has like a unit leader, and that's like the only one you care about when it comes to moving and stuff. The Rebel unit leader gets a cool duster, which is like a reason enough, because dusters are cool. Everybody knows that. I don't think this game is going to hurt X-Wing or Armada as much, but I still think people are going to dump to go play Legion, which, I don't know, like I said, they're just thinning out their communities, which I don't think is going to be good for any of these games, unless there's people like us who are playing, as many as they can. But Legion might be the game that finally makes me give up on X-Wing, because I've been slowing down on X-Wing a lot lately since last fall, and yeah, maybe Legion will be the final nail in the coffin for my X-Wing collection.
Yeah, I think what they've shown of Legion, like, it appeals the most to me of the 4 games we've been talking about, but it's also it's like, a lot of these games are an investment to get into.
Right.
This is probably going to be as much of or more of a monetary investment, but it's like a time and effort investment. Like a miniatures game like this is, these miniatures come unassembled, which they did say I think it's going to be fairly simple. Plastic assembly. They said it's similar to the Rune Wars.
If you watch the Sarastro tutorial painting video for Luke, it's essentially just his arms aren't on when you.
Okay, it's like snap together kind of a thing.
I think you still have to glue it, but that's basically it. Yeah, his arms just aren't there.
Yeah, and then if you want to actually want them to look nice, then it's painting, and then you add in the other stuff like terrain and
right. That's going to be a huge thing in this game. I don't think I'd want to play if I don't have at least some kind of fun-looking thing to play on, which is, I guess, another pro for Imperial Assault, where they're not painted, but you don't have to assemble them. You don't have to, you have the game's tiles, which kind of has terrain for you in a way.
Yeah, and I think plenty of people play Imperial Assault just with those standard
gray and tan minis.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's the ability is there if you want to go further, but but with these kind of miniature games like Legion is going for, it's definitely the expectation that you should paint them, which is just a time thing. I mean, I love painting miniatures, but
if I'm having a hard time keeping up with my Imperial Assault miniatures, and if I keep with Imperial Assault and Legion at the same time, that's going to be hard.
Better invest in an airbrush, man.
Yeah, I think I might have to finally do that.
Especially if that AT-AT comes out, you need an airbrush just to paint the damn thing.
These kind of games are always more fun too. The more like custom terrain and stuff. I mean, you don't have to go crazy like the GenCon tables they were using, but You definitely would want stuff, and maybe that'll be a little bit easier because of Star Wars, and there may be toys and stuff you can take from to.
I think there was some kind of hint or implication that Fantasy Flight might also be releasing like terrain products you can buy.
Yeah. Well, the core set comes with the barricades, and I think when they asked Alex Davey about that in one of the videos I watched, he basically said, "Well, the core set comes with the barricades, but I can't comment on anything else." Which is kind of like a way of, that basically means they've got something.
Yeah, I'm sure that they would. Just from my experience with these type of games, most of the fun situations come from, and I don't know if they have specific, or if they showed this in the demos and stuff, specific rules for things like line of sight or your elevation relation to somebody else. And
there's stuff about that in there.
Yeah, that's some of the most fun of these games. Is
the ATRT even has a special rule that lets it scale vertical cliffs because it has like claws in its feet or something.
Okay, cool. Then if they're doing that kind of stuff, that's all the stuff that makes you really want to build like a small grouping of terrain stuff so you can build these cool scenarios, because that's kind of what sets a miniatures game like this apart from just like a board game, right?
And that's what I'm hoping, that a lot of the local game stores in town have just shelves full of just random terrain for their war tables.
Yeah, and
which
would work.
I think I might end up using, because I think it'd be a lot of fun to try and learn how to craft my own terrain, because I've had a lot of fun learning how to paint my Imperial Assault stuff, but I don't know if I'd have any room in my small apartment for terrain, let alone, all the new miniatures for this game. I'm running out of room for my Imperial Assault and X-Wing stuff. They just kind of sit on the floor in my office.
Time to sell your cats.
I don't know if that would work.
Time to sell your furniture. Just get rid of your couch and then you can just sit on like the boxes
a real Star Wars fan would sell his furniture. Buy more core sets.
I just sold a Black Series action figure. I might just start selling some of my action figures for, I'll get rid of these, toys that sit on my shelf and do nothing for toys that I get to play with on the table.
So we haven't yet talked about the known upcoming expansions, have we? Or did we already talk about that a little bit? Did we touch on that?
We haven't.
Okay.
Okay, now this is like secondhand information. Like I read that somebody said that Alex Davies said this somewhere, but I'm pretty sure this is okay. So if it turns out to not be true, you can blame me for not fact checking more.
Everyone should just take this part with a grain of salt. That's all we'll say.
Seems likely enough. So I think they said in Wave 1, Leia is going to be a commander unit, which seems plausible to me. There's going to be scout troopers for the Empire. The T-47 airspeeders is going to be a heavy unit for the Rebels, so the snowspeeder in layman's terms. And the AT-ST will be a heavy unit for the Empire.
And on top of that, they've also said that every unit in the core set will also come in Wave 1 expansion packs.
Oh,
except for Luke and Vader. Luke and Vader are core box exclusive, but other than those two, all the other units you'll be able to buy separately as well.
I'm wondering how many, because I suppose a unit of Rebel Troopers is 5 figures plus some cards. Very curious to how this is going to be priced.
Yeah, a lot of these games are like price makes or breaks it. Like it could be a lot easier decision to start getting into.
Because price
it right.
Imperial Assault, the figure packs that come with 3 figures, I think are still just $15 for 3 figures that are, I would assume, less expensive to make than the figures for this game.
Well, when I looked at like the Rune Wars mini expansion packs, it looked like most of those were like $20 to $30.
Yeah, I think if it's like $30 for a squad or something, I think that's actually pretty good for miniatures.
I'm just gonna have to start doing painting commissions. Sometimes I see how much people charge for their mini painting, and I'm like, I should do that. But then I'm like, but I really like my free time.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to spend that long painting a figure, I'd rather just paint it for myself where I get to put it on the table and stuff. So I'll just sell action figures before I start painting commissions.
So what do you guys think about additional factions beyond Empire and Rebels? Because that's the only two factions we know about right now.
So initially, first thing that came to mind was obviously just Scum and Villainy, which is in X-Wing and in Imperial Assault.
The only thing that I can think of that would be a problem with a Scum faction, although I do agree that it's the most logical one because it's been done a couple times, is that a lot of those characters tend to be very individual, unique, right, big personality guys, and the only ones that I can think of where you've got a decent sized group of Scum is in Force Awakens, actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, and those guys aren't even all on like the same team,
right?
Because like I'm thinking, because we've got our commanders in this game, I can't see Boba Fett being put in the place of a commander commanding other units.
Boba Fett seems more like we were talking about what special,
or like
right.
Yeah,
he seems like a special to me.
Right. Yeah, that's what I.
Maybe, I mean, you could maybe have something like a Black Sun faction, or possibly like a Mandalorian faction, maybe.
That's like really cool. They can just go the way of the old Wizards of the Coast miniatures and use all those factions. They had Rebels, Empire, Fringe. Fringe was their Scum, and any unit from Fringe could be put into any faction.
That's what I was just gonna say. That's honestly the thing that I would.
Well, but then
I think would be cooler is if they.
I don't think Fantasy Flight wants to put Boba Fett on the Rebels or Ewoks on the Empire. At least in the old miniatures game, Ewoks were Fringe, so you could put Ewoks with like the Sith if you wanted to. That game had a lot of factions. Yeah, those main ones, and then Republic, Separatist, New Republic, Old Republic, Sith, Yuuzhan Vong, Mandalorian were all their own factions. They're going to bring back Yuuzhan Vong for this game.
Do you guys know if they've said anything about playing, or if you've seen anything about them about playing like Rebel versus Rebel?
I haven't seen anything, but I'd be surprised if you couldn't, because if you're going to a tournament, you're only going to bring one army.
Yeah. People. That's why I was wondering, is because these games tend to be you buy in to one. I just wonder how much they're keeping. That's their focus or something from like a balance.
Yeah, and all of the other games you can have, Rebel versus Rebel.
Yeah, I think the LCG is the only one where you don't.
But the game is like designed like it, so it's
exactly. It's designed to be Rebels versus Imperials.
Yeah. It's asymmetrical, so that's why it's the thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll be interested to see, I guess, what they do with factions.
Some people think they might go to either the sequel movies or the prequel movies, which I would prefer to go to the Clone Wars because those units are a lot more interesting to me.
Like I was saying, the Separatists would actually make a really cool faction. Whether you like the prequels or not, they would make a really visually interesting army. I mean, you'd have battle droids, you'd have all those crazy looking vehicles and stuff that they have. You could have Umbarans, you could have Geonosians, you could have Quarren, those shark dudes, whatever.
I think they're called Karkadons.
Could have goofy looking banking clan commander, I guess. I don't know.
I want General Grievous as a commander. That'd be like the only reason I'd buy into Cortez. But I think just the idea of having that game in the Clone Wars sounds really, that would just be really cool to see on the table, because, I mean, if you think of, there's like one shot in Attack of the Clones that keeps coming back to my head when they're, the battle has spilled out of the arena, it's on the ground, and they're just firing blindly forward through the dust. Like, that looks like a miniatures game where they're just kind of walking out there shooting wildly at each other.
The only problem I kind of see, especially if they do branch out to the other eras, and that might not be a while, because I know in one of the interviews, Alex Davey said it's Galactic Civil War era only for now, is what he said.
And I'm not sure if that was like a hint or just saying, I'm not going to ever say something is 100% certain.
Yeah, because I know like with X-Wing, when that first came out, they were like, nope, no prequel stuff, and then they dropped out the arc.
Well, they were like, no third. We're not going to do a scum faction. They said that.
Yeah, but if they did go to other eras, I think you'd have problems with a lot of factions looking alike. I mean, because it's like if you look at the game board and you see, oh, got a bunch of soldiers in white armor. Okay, well, is he playing Republic? Is he playing Empire? Or is he playing First Order? Who knows? Until you stop and look closer at everything.
Also help with your paint jobs and how you do basing. And I've seen pictures of the unpainted miniatures for Legion. The Empire will have black bases and the Rebels will have red bases. And I wonder if they did other factions, maybe the Republic would have blue bases and the Separatists would have yellow bases. So even if they're unpainted, all the bases at least kind of easily visually separate them.
That sounds like that would be though like really ugly. Just if you have like these really nicely painted up minis and then like just these like primary
I still don't know what I'd
want or whatever.
I still don't know what I want to do with my bases. All of my like 90% of my Imperial Assault ones just have black bases, which has been completely fine for me. Yeah. But I feel like Legion is kind of asking for more. But I always just have that thing like I don't want to have a bunch of grasslands underneath the guy when I'm playing on like a snow map. I gotta find like the most neutral thing.
If you show up at the store and your opponent has set up a map in an improper biome, just take your minis and go home. Tell them you're not playing today.
Just turn up my nose and walk out. I was thinking of maybe doing some kind of like gray rocks or gray sand to be like the most biome neutral thing.
You could always do those really ugly clear bases.
I don't know if that would be as good in Legion. The bases are really thick.
Yeah. I think the clear bases are ugly. Like I don't get why people like them.
I think they look fine because like it fixes that problem for Imperial Assault because now when the terrain is whatever you're standing on because you can see through it. I think it looks fine as long as you do it right and the glue isn't everywhere.
I don't know if that's something that we talked about yet, but are you guys looking forward to making big terrain features? Because that's not something that we've really had to do with any Fantasy Flight miniatures before. It's certainly a Warhammer thing.
I definitely would like to learn. I mean, like watching the demos from GenCon and just looking at the really amazing bits of terrain they had. I was just like, wow, that would be really awesome.
Yeah, I'm interested to learn too, but like I said, I don't know if I have room for it. If Fantasy Flight is selling their own specific Star Wars stuff, that might be really tempting. And I definitely won't be doing anything with elevation changes unless I like make a hill that's separate. Because like one of the tables at Gen Con, the Endor one, like had this nice like slope to the whole table where like one end of the table is maybe 6 inches higher or something. Like that would just take up too much space if I made a whole table like that.
Yeah, when I played 40K, when I was really playing it, because I've kind of gone back to it a few times, like what we did was you would make different, maybe like 2-inch elevation, like hills, and you just out of like polystyrene and stuff, like you would get these foams, you get like a foam cutter, and you'd make those, and then the idea being that you could stack, you could stack like 6 of them if you wanted a huge hill or not. But yeah, the idea of like those kind of tables that they had there are like only maybe a game store would have, or the company that makes a game, because you could, those tables were that layout. Every time you play on it, it's going to be that. And I think more of the stuff you're probably going to want to make is like a little modular, okay, this lets me make a really big hill or just a slight incline. And same with buildings. Like I can have this be a 2-story or just a 1-story or things like that. Or the thing that I think that was most fun, just because, yeah, you can't have, a specific scenario for every single thing, like a whole table for that. You kind of have to be like, here's a box full of parts that I can assemble into a bunch of different scenarios.
So we know a little bit about what's coming, and without even speculating about prequels or sequels, what do you guys have a wish list of things you would want to be able to play with in this game?
Rebels on Tauntauns.
Well, see,
Force control wampas.
That's even weirder than me having grass on my base on the snow. Like a tauntaun is an Arctic creature. It can't.
I know, but you paint it like it's desert themed, and that's why it's really cool, and it wins the painting competition.
Well, isn't there? They're
You
probably
make
not.
like a camel tauntaun.
Well, they're not canon. I don't think they're canon anymore. But I thought there were like warm weather adapted tauntauns in Legends.
Well, they are lizards
maybe.
after all, right?
They're like mammal lizards.
Okay.
Oh man, you're just bringing a different podcast. I haven't listened to in a while because I've been like binging The Dollop for like 4 months now. But Star Wars in character, they just cover like basically a Wikipedia article each episode of a random background thing. They had one about tauntauns, and now there's some weird stuff going on in that episode because they talk about like tauntaun breast milk on Wikipedia, I think.
Okay.
I could see there actually being a mini of that. It'd be cool. That's probably the only thing that would actually happen.
Tauntaun breast milk? Like just guys just milking it?
Yeah. No, that's like one of the cards you flip over.
He's a
like,
special.
It's like you flip a card and it's like mother's milk, and the rider on the tauntaun can drink from the tauntaun to like be healed.
Oh god.
Yep. Although they lacked mammary glands, tauntauns could regurgitate a form of milk produced in their crops.
Oh my gosh, that's even better. It's just puking into the rider's mouth.
It leans its head back and the rider leans forward and they just go mouth to mouth. Give it to me, baby.
Yeah.
I'm not going to survive this battle. I need it.
See, if Tauntaun hadn't died when they put Luke inside of it, they just would have been like, Luke needs it. Luke needs that milk. Cough it up.
I do wonder about creatures because, Imperial Salt has the Rancor and Nexu and Wampas and Dewbacks. Dewbacks make sense because people are riding them, but in Legion, especially when you're giving commands, and it shouldn't feel any different than Imperial Salt, but it kind of does, like, are these animals trained? Like, would I get a Rancor on my team? Like, scale-wise, you think they'd want to do it, but
I feel
it
like
feels...
you have to.
Like,
but only in a way that fits, yeah.
It does feel kind of different. And, like I said, these creatures are in Imperial Assault, and they're, you have your Rancor walking alongside IG-88 and they're best friends, but
maybe
for whatever reason, it doesn't feel as weird.
Maybe they'll make Dathomiri Rancor riders canon again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like Legion is definitely going for more of a realistic vibe, which I know is kind of silly, but yeah, like these kind of miniatures games tend to go for something that's unique. At least for me, I want it to feel like thematically appropriate. So yeah, I don't think you'd see like a Wampa, right? It's just like, why am I fighting for the rebellion?
And
I can see like a Rancor or like a Handler and a Rancor as like a special unit or something. I think creatures can be their own faction, and the only commander they get is Malakili, the Rancor keeper, because he knows how to call him. There's just like it's just like rebels versus nature. That's just all I know. But that's what we did in the latest. That was the theme of my latest Imperial Assault YouTube video, was hunters versus beasts, and it was kind of it was brutal. But
for who? The hunters?
Yeah,
or the
I don't want to spoil it. Go watch it.
Oh, sorry.
I kind of want to see an AT-AT, even if I'm not like playing as Empire.
That would be really cool to see.
I am wondering. I mean, we're going to get the air speeders. I'm wondering if they're going to do like X-wings or anything, because they don't have to be perfectly to scale with them. Because the idea would be that they're in the air, so the scale can be skewed a bit. I wonder if they would do that if they're going to do air speeders.
Yeah, I'm interested in that.
I don't know.
How that's going to work out, because it would also just feels like it would require, or you would want to play with like snow speeders on a much larger playfield than the minimum.
Because I would assume the snow speeder would have the speeder keyword, which the speeder bikes have, which says when you activate, you're obligated to do a move at full speed before taking your 2 actions.
Yeah.
So they're constantly flying around the map, which is really cool. Like, they can't stop.
What if
how do I turn this off? I don't know.
What if the AT-AT was just 4 feet that you put on the map to represent that it was standing above the map.
But that reminds me of Mice and Mystics. Like, there's a boss fight in that game where you're fighting a cat, but there's just a token for the paw that you put down.
Yeah, I'm like, you could do that, and then it wouldn't cost, $400 and be this huge thing. But
you'd have to have rules where, like, okay, the front left foot always has to be within this much distance of the front right foot, and so on.
And there's to be special rules for it taking damage to its feet and if it would fall or not.
Wow, once I know more about how the game...
That could also be like a scenario, too.
Yeah, once I have it in my head, more about the game stats, I'll have to try and come up with some custom stats for the AT-AT so I can play when that comes out. Because I have the old Wizards of the Coast AT-AT, which should be close enough scale-wise, I guess. Yeah, because if they do an AT-AT, I wonder if they did it, they couldn't do it perfectly to scale with those figures. That'd be too big.
Yeah, it would be really, really big. I think that at least it
would fill up like a good chunk of the map all on its own.
It sounds more like the kind of it feels more like the kind of thing that would be like you build a scenario around it, where it would almost be like I was saying, like those four markers or 4 just feet on the map, and you have it be it's an Empire versus Rebel fight, and then one of the rebels like win conditions or point conditions, right, would be to knock it over.
Oh, and that is something we forgot to talk about. Unlike all the other games, Imperial Assault, Armada, and X-Wing, you don't get points for killing things. X-Wing is just kill people. Armada is kill people, but also do these objectives. So is Imperial Assault. Legion, obviously you're shooting at people, but the only way to win is by doing and getting objective points.
Well, it's not the only way. You can also win by completely eliminating every unit in your enemy's arm.
Which I think Alex Davies said is almost impossible.
Yeah, he said it's very difficult to do that.
Because you're limited to 6 rounds. So you have to focus on these objectives, which I think is cool. Because that's one of the things I like about Armada and Imperial Assault is that they actually have these objectives that shift the way you play. But in the end, you could still just duke it out in a gunfight. Where in this game, you don't have a choice. You have to do the objectives, which are going to make it feel... Because I think he said one of the objectives is like stealing the Death Star plans or something. He said they wanted to make them all feel like very Star Wars-y things that were happening, which I think sounds really cool.
And as we all know from our episode of OSIS we did, stealing the Death Star plans is like the most Star Wars-y thing you can do. And it would probably even still be canon if you and the 4 tables next to you were all trying to steal the Death Star plans.
Because you got to steal a little piece of it at a time.
Uh-huh.
That's how that works. Jyn Erso got off easy. All right, well, I can't think of anything that I particularly wish for. I think it has all been named. If people couldn't tell, I'm not super stoked for this. Just the type of game that it is, that it requires so much, like everyone else on the show has just said, it requires a much heavier investment. Imperial Assault is the kind of miniatures game that I want to play. It's just a matter of finding the time to do it. But I'm gonna be sticking with Imperial Assault over Legion until the day comes when FFG cancels all their other miniatures games, and this is all that's left.
And I'm going to be sticking with Imperial Assault too, because, like I've said before, Imperial Assault's my favorite of all these Star Wars games, and I've been painting these figures. I really like Skirmish Campaign. It's a lot of fun. I don't see myself abandoning this game anytime soon, but I'm also going to do my best to try and get into Legion as well. And that might mean maybe Destiny or X-Wing fall a bit to the wayside, but we'll see what happens.
I'm just glad that I didn't end up investing in Imperial Assault. Like, I was kind of getting to the point, especially like people posting on Discord all their sweet paint jobs they've been doing and stuff. I've been like, oh man, maybe it's time to finally buy Imperial Assault and start playing that, but not anymore.
I wonder if there was someone at Gen Con, like before the thing on it. Or he's there when like the people in the Stormtrooper costumes are standing and they're like unveiling the tables and showing the banner.
He just like he drops the box.
All the pieces fly everywhere, like all the minis fly everywhere on the floor. Yeah, I'm very interested in it, but I would say I fall into the like more positive version of Evan on this one. I think where I'm I think that it seems like a very well made game. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the Fantasy Flight like bits and baubles for everything thing. Like I would still kind of like that. Here's a core rule book, or here's like a rule book, and here are the miniatures thing. But if the price is right, like maybe. But I would get into it very casually. Like core set, I'd buy a core set. I'd put it together, maybe paint them, just so that friends and I could play that. Just because I don't really, it's not what I want to put my money and time into right now. But it seems well made.
Yeah, I plan on getting it, but I don't plan on trying to be super competitive about it. I'm sure there'll be a community in town. There's already people talking on some of the Facebook pages around here excited about it. So I'll have people to play against, but I'm not going to try and, be the best.
That's probably a good approach to take.
And I'm curious, because for like 2 days I was like really considering getting rune miniatures because I was just looking through all the articles. I'm like, these look fun. This looks neat. And I'm like, well, maybe I should just wait like a year and see what factions exist at that point and see if there's one that really kind of speaks to me. And I'm wondering, like, well, what if I play as the Rebels and then like a year later they come out with the Republic, but I can't really afford to like just switch? Because I think I'd pick the Republic over the Rebels, but I'm going to pick the Rebels over the Empire just because.
So just stop buying Rebels and then buy Republic.
Then I kind of got to start. I don't know.
I mean, would it really be any different if you had just stuck with Rebels and so Republic comes out, but you continue to buy Rebels minis? Well, you're still spending the money on the minis one way or the other.
I guess, but then I'm going to have like my Rebels aren't going to be as good as they could be if I had stuck with it.
There would definitely also be that moment of like, because this uses a point system, right, for the units. Like you would play an 800 point army or something like that.
Yeah, I think
there would also be that moment when they introduce a new faction where you'd be like, oh, that's the faction I really want to be playing, which doesn't just mean you would continue buying the normal stream of minis you might be if you stayed with it. It'd be like you need to hit 800, right? You need to hit whatever your points are that you tend to play at.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting thing that I've never run into because 40K has been around forever, right? So when I sat down to play, it's like, okay, there's like 15 factions, and they're all pretty fleshed out. So yeah, that's kind of unavoidable without just saying like, I'll check back in 3 years.
Yeah, and I mean, even with Star Wars, it's like, well, I can guess what future factions would be, but with Fantasy Flight, I have no idea whether that's how likely that is to happen or not.
Yeah, like you'd almost want them to come out and communicate it a little clearly.
Right. And maybe they will even before, because Rune Wars is still really young, and they've already, they've been saying, okay, this faction is going to be coming out, this faction is going to be coming out.
So maybe they'll communicate a little bit more. I think that might actually be helpful, because they might find more people willing to buy in early if they know that in 6 months they aren't going to want to use those minis anymore.
But I'm not sure, because then if I play Republic and everybody's playing Empire, that's going to be kind of weird. I don't know. Maybe I'll just stick with Rebels, and I'll like it.
Well,
because of the dusters.
Because of the dusters, yes. That's as good an excuse as any. Then you have to wear sunglasses and.
I want you to paint up their dusters so they all have like fantastic dusters, like
Joseph's amazing Technicolor Joseph.
Yes.
I was honestly thinking of, because isn't it sort of common practice to kind of give your army an overarching kind of color theme? He's got all of his army are like red and silver, and all of his are
definitely. You kind of
I was thinking,
in these games.
Maybe I would do like the Jodo cast colors, just do like dark green and orange, like maybe in a subtle way or something.
Yeah, it's a little harder with something like stormtroopers who are all pretty standardized for them.
I would still throw some color on there, because I mean, I did so many stormtroopers for Imperial Assault. It's like, I'm just going to make them look a little bit cooler, because you got the Shock Trooper or the 501st Legion Stormtrooper. Like, there's a couple instances of like colorful stormtroopers, not like that you'd see all in formation like in Legion, but still, I think I'd end up just kind of doing something I thought looked cool, even if it didn't look like something that Stormtroopers should be having.
I'd like to see somebody just like go like way overboard and customize like a whole squad of Stormtroopers to look like those guys from the Darth Vader or from the Star Wars comic.
Oh, the Scar Squadron?
Scar Squad. Yeah, I kept wanting to say Havoc Squad, but I'm like, no, that's Old Republic.
Well, I wonder if, maybe they'll be giving us Inferno Squad or something as like a special. But that's a wish list item. Death Troopers. I guess you could just make all your Stormtroopers Shadow Troopers and just paint them black.
Just set them all down and spray paint them all black.
Or that stupid Disco Trooper from the Celebration cosplay contest. Just put glitter all over it
and roll them in glitter.
All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed our first discussion on Legion. I'm sure we'll be having many more to come.
Someone looked up the exact amount of Stormtroopers in a Legion, because a Legion is a unit of stuff.
Yes.
I think it's like 12,000 something Stormtroopers make up a Legion. So someone was like, you're going to have to buy more than one core box if you want to get that.
There you go. Learn something new every day. All right, we can probably wrap this up, and I did it last time, and I'll do it again if nobody else wants to do it.
Such a good doer, though.
It's true. Wait. Yes, I am a good doer. I don't know. Joe likes this.
Hey, people listening to us, you can, depending on how much you like us, visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/thejodocast, to see what sort of things you could get out of it beyond just giving us your support and your love. I think that, Christian, when you signed up on Patreon, did it ask for a love donation as well, or just $1?
It was just monetary, but I gave my love just kind of over the tubes.
Yeah, Christian, he really goes the extra mile. And if you like us a lot, but not Patreon a lot, or maybe you do like us Patreon a lot, but you can't fit that into your life right now, if you just share us with a friend who you think might enjoy us, that goes a long ways too. Like that, you should do that, or leave an iTunes review. Even just the little things, being like, "Hey, there's this stupid Star Wars gaming podcast that you might like." Like, just do that. That helps. You can listen to us or tell other people to tell your friend to listen to us on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, or our RSS feed. If you want to get more of us in your life, you can look at our Twitter, twitter.com we're at the JodoCast. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. And if your eyeballs need something, you can go to Twitch and also YouTube. We putting out pretty regular stuff on YouTube these days. You can talk to other people who are into the same things that you are and that we are at reddit.com/r/thejodocast, or better yet, on our Discord. You can find a link to our Discord server on jodocast.com. There's always almost literally day-long discussion flowing. People coming in and coming out talking about Star Wars, board games, comics, movies, whatever. Our Discord, it's a fun place. I'm actually pretty impressed how it's been taken off. And if you want to shout into the wind, you can email us, show@jodocast.com. How was that?
That was excellently done. Masterfully played. All right, so with that, thank you again for listening, as always, and thank you to Christian for being on again, and Leo and Joe for breathing. So, with that, we'll talk with you next time. With that, we'll talk with you next time. Whoa, that's some heavy breathing. We'll just put that.
You're welcome.
After the end music is gone, people still have it playing. They'll just hear.